Hey guys, Mcfast here. Hey, I wanted to show you the process I'm going to use on this Hobby King GPS. Just, it's the Quanum. There you go. Sorry, I got it down in tight so you'll be able to see the wiring down inside. Um, First thing I did was I took my X-Acto knife and I lifted up the little tab and pulled back on that and got it out. And I took my Torx bit and the 4 screws that hold it in, hold the back on, I removed, and I got a little magnet here out of the hard drive that I use to hold my metal parts when I'm working on something so I don't lose them. I don't know if you got a magnetic pit mat or a container of some kind. I also use a lid with a strip of magnet, which doesn't work too well, but when you add a magnet out of the hard drive, it works pretty decent. All depends on how big a project you're working on. Okay, so once we do that, we can pull this top completely off and it's separated. Now, if you will notice, it's got foil here, aluminum tape basically, that's a shield for the GPS unit. That's the GPS unit right there. To remove it, you're going to need a small screwdriver. I got this old set from Radio Shack. It's got a little spinner handle on it. They work great. I mean, the tips look brand new, and I mean, these are easily, I don't know, 15 years old, something like that. I've had them for an extremely long time, maybe 10 years. 10 years is closer. Anyway, you want to undo these 4 screws. Then once you've done that, you'll be able to lift the circuit board up out of there. Now there's a ribbon on the back side for the display, which is this, which is this right here. Okay, so be careful not to damage or move that. Right here you can see is the GPS, so be cautious of that. And up on top there's nothing there. There's brass screws holding it in, and then these little things are something to do with the liquid crystal display. Those are your 2 buttons right there that this rocker switch is hitting. Okay, now when we come back to the back portion here, you're going to see 3 wires soldered. You got a black, which is your ground. You got the red, which they've got crossed over too much, and it was actually pinched in the case. Then you have your white wire, which is a signal wire. I got to thinking about just removing the pin, and I didn't feel it was sufficient because this then becomes an antenna, not necessarily for radio, but for any frequency waves that's in the area, from your radio, from electrical noise generated by the device. And I think that's some of the problem here. Is I think that this signal is picking up electricity through the receiver, and then it's going back and interfering with the GPS portion of logging or not, because it makes mention that it can tell in some situations when you are actually in movement or not, based upon signals. I think 1500 US. I'm not sure what the strength of that actually is, but that's how it's done. I think it's 380 to 1500 US. I'd have to go back and read. But anyway, we got to be really careful on my soldering pencil, gun, tip, whatever. I'm using a chisel, which is fairly large in comparison to what we're going to solder. I chose that because in the past, when I've used this conical tip, let me get out of the package and just show you, since this is, we're going through the whole process. This conical tip is 30 thousandths on the end. That doesn't heat very much of an area at one time. Even on really small surface mounted transistors, this give me trouble. I've got the heat set on 4. Let me tilt up and pan. There's the soldering station I'm using, just the Weller WL100, I believe it is. It's nothing extremely fancy. And what we got to do is be careful that we do not lift that solder pad. It may not cause a problem, but if that lead's needed and it needs to be reattached, we need to be able to do that. And without a solder tab being there, the only way I know to do it is on one of my amateur radios I was doing some modifications on. I damaged the pads. I lifted them up with this exact tip at this exact heat, and it wasn't because there wasn't enough heat, it was because I didn't give enough time to melt the solder. So while the top was flowing, the base wasn't, and the solder tabs just pulled right off with the solder. And so that'll piss you off in a hurry when you're working on a $1,000 plus radio and you turn it into a brick, and then you got to figure out how to get it back going. And it took me about 2 weeks, 3 weeks, pretty much 15 to 18 hours a day. Man, I would non-stop either research or trying different techniques. And I finally did it with a circuit writer pen, which, by the way, takes 24 hours to dry. The conductivity will improve over time as it dries. But anyway, that's subject for another story. My tip, I want to make it shiny. So there we go. We got it shiny. Now let's figure out how we're going to attack this. I'm going to try to move these wires over here as much as I can out of the way. I'll try to zoom down. I know I'm going to get, my hands are going to get in the way, so you just, hopefully you're patient with me, but I need to do this right while I'm showing you at the same time. There's a little surface mounted transistor right there, some more smaller ones even right here, and it doesn't look like this pad is very substantial under that. I could just clip that off to be safe and not have to solder it, which I think I'm going to do, because as I look at this, these wires are also used in this. This is where you hook it up to the PC to retrieve the data out of it. So I'm thinking, see how it's glued, it's soldered there also. I think I'm going to cut that right flush with the circuit board. May not have to do any soldering at all, take any chance. So let's see, Get this turned around here. Looks like no matter how I go, that's going to be in the way. Let me swap out tips on my X-Acto knife. What did I do? There it is. I think we're going to try that shape right there. I'm not an electronic expert by no means, but I've been a do-it-yourselfer since I was about 8 years old, from building custom chopper bicycles and stuff like that. And I was very fortunate to have an old man. Well, I say old, I'm just about his age now, but he was really nice. I didn't have a father, you know, I was raised by a single parent and my aunt. So I was very fortunate to have him to show me how to use tools and be a mechanic and troubleshoot. And I think about that man every day. But anyway, we're going to see if we can get down in here now with this chisel tip and try to cut that without cutting any of the circuit board. There we go. Alright, that was simple enough. Now we just got to put it back together. Let me switch this X-Acto stuff around. So we're safe. I know it's always a running joke, safety first, but I tell you what, you don't appreciate your good health until you lose it, and then you'd give anything to have it back. So even small cuts, even if they're clean with a X-Acto, is something you don't need to have to go through in life, so why do it? Alright, this time I'm going to make sure these wires are straightened out like they should be. Yep, they lay out like they're pinned, so I'm going to straighten them out. I'm going to turn this back around this direction like it was. Make sure everything's going back. We want to make sure that we align. Whoops, you ain't able to see. There you go. We want to make sure our rocker panel, or a D switch I think it might be called, is back. Got it. There we go. Nice and seated. Yeah, this is only made for 2 wires. It's only notched for 2, so that's trying to fit 3 through there. Electrostatic straps. A lot of times when you're working on circuit boards, people rave about using them. I've had some electronic courses in the military, and we worked on anti-static tiling. Our benches was anti-static. All of the tools was anti-static. It was to the extreme to keep static electricity away. What I found out, and gosh, I started working on computers in 1988, so 27 years I guess that is. It's not that big of a concern for these electronics. Generally we're not working on something sensitive enough for the static electricity to do damage. And one way you can always do it is just put your finger on something that's grounded, like that screw. Now you're grounded to it. And I was seeing an article on the news where they're talking about those anti-static strips don't work anyway. Straps. I got several. I got one in the other room where I work on my radios, and just a piece of Velcro goes around your wrist. It's got a piece of metal with an alligator clip that comes out that you clip to a ground, so then you're grounded to the component in your hand so you can't generate spark. I want to make sure my rocker switch is working, and it is. Remember the foil cover, we want to make sure it goes back over the GPS. Widen that out a bit. In fact, I might turn it this direction, it might help some. We've got to line the cover up over our exterior slot. Now we'll take our screws off of our magnet. Get them started here. Now I don't even know what brand these hex drivers are. Only way I know the size is by measurement, so I usually just see if they fit. But I've had these since the late 80s when I was flying helicopters. I had a Concept 60. That was a huge bird, and I chose that as my first aircraft to learn to fly, because the way I looked at it is you got to learn on every single one of them. They say fly a plane first, and flying a plane to me was much harder than a rotary wing aircraft. Fixed wing was much more difficult to deal with, and I just went slow. Hell, even after 6 months I was just barely getting what I'd call proficient at hovering, and had started venturing out into flight. But I took my instructor's advice and got a fixed wing radio control vehicle and went out and was trying to use it to help hone my skills, and I think it actually put me farther back. I was racing cars at the same time, so I had a Serpent. I was concentrating on it more than all the rest because I love my racing. It's something serious to me, kind of like my guitars and amps and firearms. Anyway, there we are. We're all back together. That seems to be working. Now all I gotta do is plug it into a vehicle and with some power and see what happens. I know it didn't, as long as the radio for the car wasn't turned on, it worked just fine, but with the radio turned on, it'd last 35 seconds, maybe a minute, 2 minutes, doing just like the other one did. So I'm going to give this a shot and see what happens. Hopefully it might fix it. Before I go, if you do want to do this, you will need your X-Acto knife, proper sized hex wrench, a magnet or something to contain your small screwdriver or your small screws, and a small Phillips. If you want to go the soldering method, don't forget your soldering station, and most importantly, patience. Stuff goes wrong. So at any rate, this is Mcfast. Hope maybe this will turn out to be helpful. We'll see, and I'll be back with another video to let you know. Peace.